to the first episode of the new Eating Alabama podcast. Today on the show, we had Chris Melville on. Had a great conversation, learned a little bit about him. He's over at Dyron's Lowcountry that's located over in Crestline and Mountain Brook. It's a fantastic guest. We had a great conversation. I had so much fun talking to him today. We did have a little bit of problems because, again, I'm new to the whole video thing, and I actually had my camera recording on internal instead of on the memory card, so it got full at the very end of it. So Jen got it on her phone, so we've got some footage of it, but it's going to seem a little, you'll see it. But anyways, so I want to thank Lee's Coffee Shop at Workplay here for allowing us to our new space. I guess it's going to be our new space, our Birmingham space when we're here recording. We're going to be doing it here at Lee's. So super thankful to Lee's and my buddy Lee Bill for allowing us to come and record in the vinyl room. But yeah, so let's get on to the conversation with Chef Chris Melville. Hope you enjoy it. We started doing this aspect of it. I'm like, again, I'm not a video guy. I'm not going to be talking to. We'll do that more. But right. As far as this podcast goes, I'm just like, it's just going to be a camera capturing the moment. Like the audio. And like you were saying, you're learning all this stuff. I've been learning this stuff 3-4 years now. We've been doing this, and I feel like I still don't know everything. But it's a fun part of this.
I've got this small little round table of friends that they're this. I don't know why they let me talk with them, but we do, because they're like far smarter than I am. I feel like, and so I've been doing, like, I don't know, every week or every other week we do like a Zoom conversation. Yeah. But there's a station in New York City that one of the things was could be for that. But anyway, I'm on like the uptake of all this stuff right now. Yeah. Like just helping with the church, but then doing this other thing and now doing this. So. Yeah,
that kind of helps get you thrown into it.
That's it.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it.
Well,
because I think that was one of the things that held me back initially from doing just the podcast in general. I talked to my wife, Jen, about it, and I'm like, I'd love to do it, but I was very hesitant because I'm like, I don't know anything about it.
That's it.
And she was at the point, she was like, just buy the equipment and just do it. And it's either going to be good and it'll get better.
That's right.
And so that's what it was. It was like, and this is kind of the same thing. I'm having to take that. Again, you're the first one on the video side of it. It may not look great right now, but hopefully we'll get that ironed out. Right. And, it's a process. And I'm glad that you're part of this process.
Well, I'm grateful to be a part of that. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to help in that regard. Yeah. I'm excited.
Well, I'm glad. Thank you again for taking out of your day. I know, like I said, it's a Sunday and off day for you, but okay. I'm appreciative of that. And this podcast is typically just the journey of the chef. Okay. Before we get into that, just some small stuff. Yeah. We got Valentine's Day coming up. So, are you the type of chef that kind of enjoys those holidays and stuff to where you can kind of plan around it, or are you just like business as usual, but you're still going to give the best you can give,
Yeah, probably the latter. It sounds cynical, but it's not cynicism. It really isn't.
Right.
I've noticed that, like, back in the early days for me, these things like Valentine's Day was huge. I don't remember if you remember a restaurant called Armand's in Park Lane.
Absolutely.
But that was like my first big chef's job, if you will. And Valentine's Day was like one of the biggest.
Yeah, it's an Italian restaurant too, so
we did
everybody thinks
like
Italian.
700 people for dinner out of that place.
Oh, wow.
That night. Yeah, it was like an insane benchmark, really. I'll never forget that. And then back then, of course, was the era of the prefix thing, where, and maybe it's sort of playing to our audience, where Dyron's, to me, it just feels more like an elevated neighborhood restaurant.
Yes.
And so you kind of want to be reliable on having, not really staples, but, and so the idea, it feels a bit like extortion to kind of expect people to pay like a flat rate and then kind of strong arm them into getting multiple courses.
Right.
I don't know, I'm not. Maybe there's a part of me that kind of feels like that ship has sailed.
But I think there's,
there are places for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's one of the things that I value as far as any restaurant or chef. It's like you do how you want to do it. Like you said, there's plenty of space, there's plenty of people doing that kind of stuff, and I respect. It's just almost business as usual. It's just going to be another place for people to celebrate whatever it is, whether it be a holiday or anniversary. It's just, again, you're going to give the same service, the same, quality of food. Everything's going to be the same. It's just a holiday.
As we have kind of decided that was the direction we were going to go, we've had people respond to us with like, thank God you're not doing a prefix.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, like one of my favorite things to do is, we're wine dinners, planned wine dinners, and working with Frank in the early days, that to me, there's a level of genius that Frank has for that sort of thing that goes well above and beyond what would be the normal menu that you go there and eat. We're talking. I'll give you an example. We were doing a winemaker dinner, and we had it was a course that was pompano in parchment or in papios, and it was being paired with a Merceau, which is a white Burgundy, and Merceau typically, and in this case most definitely, tends to be known for having like vanilla notes, on the nose and such, and so Frank. You scraped vanilla bean onto the fish, along with like citrus zest and butter and some torn herbs, and then folded it all up, sealed it up. And there was nothing sweet about it.
Right.
It was just the aromatics. But when you took a bite of that fish and then had like a little sip of the Merceau, the sum was greater than the parts.
Yeah.
And it was like an elevating, it just was like a rocket ship of force multiplier, if you will, And that sort of put a key in my imagination and unlocked it, really.
Yeah.
That was just one example, but I hadn't forgotten it.
No, those are things, as we've grown with Eating Alabama, we've had opportunities to do that. I was never a big wine drinker growing up. I was never really a big alcohol drinker until my late, probably 30s is when I'm 51 now, and probably 30 was when I really started, drinking cocktails and having more. But when I finally had a good wine dinner that, like you said, that the flavors just kind of meld with the wine that's being presented with the dish, that's when I started to understand it. Yeah. And then I've grown to really enjoy. I'm still not a big wine drinker. Right. But I do appreciate that, and I do love going to a prefixed wine dinner where it is, when it's, done well. We have had some that's just been like, okay, that, but then there's some that's, like you said, they just blows your mind, and it just, everything just kind of explodes, and it's really good.
Some people are gifted with photographic memories, and or they can remember. I have a flavor memory like that. Like I can remember flavors and things that I've tasted, and I kind of hold them in my mind, and I can go back to them or recreate. And I say that in the context of somebody who. I quit drinking 16 years ago. Okay. So would I do a wine dinner today? Absolutely. Yeah. I can, and 90% of it is smell. Right. Anyway, I mean, you get a cold, you can't taste anything. It's that idea, And so I don't have. I mean, it's not a temptation to me. It's not I don't have any issues with it. Would I do it? I would embrace it. Right. But absolutely. It's just sort of funny, kind of ironic. Yeah. I'm not much of I'm a non-drinker at this point.
But you've done it long enough to where
it's no threat. I'm not triggered by anything, and I certainly don't. It worked great for me until it quit working for me, and then I had a little trouble figuring that out for a while, and then but thankfully I'm on the other side of that.
Well, awesome. That's good to hear. Well, all right. Well, let's start all the way to the beginning. We're gonna go back to young Chris Melville. All right. So where were you born and raised? Okay. Introduce. Were you supposed to do that? No. Okay. I'll cut this out. I just didn't want you to miss it. I'm going to do it like I've always done it. So. Okay. Anyways, born and raised.
Okay. I was born in Washington, D.C. Only lived there for a few months, so I don't have any memory of that.
Right.
And then we moved around a lot, like on average every 2 or 3 years, from places like Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Arkansas, Slidell, Louisiana, Montgomery, Alabama. And that was in 1977, Montgomery. And that's basically, although I've left and come back, Alabama's been my home since that time.
Yeah. So moving around, was that family
Moving around,
like
and that'll make
tied to the job, to parents' job or something?
Yeah,
or okay.
Yeah. And so on one hand, it kind of, I felt like I was missing a sense of like where you come from.
Yes.
And a sense of identity that comes from that. I didn't have that. I always felt like I was an outsider. No matter where I was. I feel better about that situation today, but I mean, it definitely. So, and the way that it matters to me now is realizing that our food traditions, regional, in this case, Southern, as an example, but not the only one. Well, these are things that I think are in danger of getting lost, because we're kind of a generation or two removed from, my generation of cooks. Many of them were either at their mother's side or their grandmother's side and such. And now, we've got a couple generations of drive-through and chicken finger eating, and they don't, and they don't really even know. They didn't get that experience. So, but I've thought about like what may have. There were two things I think that kind of put me on the path, I guess, that led to where I am now. One of them was, as a kid, I preferred like the conversation of adults. I wanted to hang out. So my parents would have dinner parties, and I wanted to find a way to be able to be in on that. And so I became like the wine steward. I would like walk around the table and refill people's wine, and it gave me access.
So service
to
at an early age.
So my dad had worked at one point as a research librarian for the New York Times. And he worked back then with Craig Claiborne, who's a big, food writer, wrote the New York Times cookbook. So growing up, we had that on top of our refrigerator, the New York Times cookbook. My parents' anniversary, my dad would make eggs Benedict for my mom, and hollandaise sauce and all of that.
Yeah.
So these are all things that I figured out after I'm like, I wonder, but yeah.
So at an early age, you were
just
kind
a few
of
little
in
things,
it.
and
planting some seeds.
And then one of a real formative thing was I was a very picky eater.
Okay.
And I think that kind of today that evolved into being discernment, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, like, fanatical discernment. So, my mom, God bless her, would indulge me like a grilled cheese sandwich if I had two, like half the bread would have brown mustard and the other half not. One sandwich would be cut in rectangle, the other one in triangle.
Interesting.
Because the triangle sandwich eats differently than the rectangle
one.
It
Absolutely.
just does.
It does.
I don't really know how to explain it.
Right. No, I agree.
I bet so. Those
can't have a
details,
peanut butter jelly sandwich. It's got to be diagonal every time.
So at maybe 5 years old, I earned somehow the permission to be able to attempt making those things for myself. 5 or 6, somewhere in there. Now all this stuff I tied together after the fact.
Yeah.
I didn't, because honestly, I didn't seek cooking out or this career out. It kind of found me.
Okay.
I feel like it chose me. And I've done, I'd say a good percentage of my career has been in the front of the house too. So I've done all the jobs really in a restaurant. So I do think that kind of laid some of the background, for it. But the pickiness, all the things that I wouldn't eat, and a lot of that was textural. But and at least now, I eat everything now.
I've grown to be that way too. I was not super picky as a child, but I don't say, I guess maybe just limited. because I come from what I've always said, my mom was a Betty Crocker generation. So it's like she wasn't, we didn't have generational type cuisine in our family. It was just things that she would see, maybe stuff that was, in a local church cookbook or something. And then she ended up working in a lunchroom when I was in high school. So it was stuff that they made, so it wasn't anything rooted, but it was just a little bit of here and there. So I really wasn't exposed to a lot. And like my wife, Jen, we relate to you in a sense because she grew up overseas. Her dad worked for the State Department, so she traveled a lot. Where you were saying, you long for somewhere rooted. I was rooted because I was born and raised in Bessemer, Alabama. My parents and grandparents and all, everybody, generations still lived there. So, I can understand that aspect of you longing for something, not having a sense of identity in a way because of moving. But it's interesting that the food aspect of it, as I was hearing you tell that, I'm thinking, okay, you're going to pick up things from all these cities, but it's not necessarily that. It still came from your family, and in the things that they maybe come across, or just like our kids now, they're learning a lot of food because we do fast food stuff. We have done it because, again, that's the generation, even though we weren't raised that way.
No.
It's just the simple things, especially as our kids were growing up, playing sports. It's like easy. Yeah. But even my son at 15 now, he's working in a restaurant like on weekends and stuff, and he's starting to understand there's things outside of just, the normal. And so, that's pretty interesting. So growing up, like you said, would you say there was anything that kind of sparked? I know you said you kind of fell into it, but was there any kind of spark that kind of pushed you into the culinary world, or was it, how did that kind of unfold?
I was working as a server in a restaurant and at a place, and it had a chef, and it was a younger guy, and he was talented, and they were, it was a busy restaurant, and it was my first exposure to a chef, run kitchen. It was some creativity going on. And one day the salad guy called out sick, and I filled in, and I was like, this is so much more fun back here. And if I told you the place, you might get a chuckle out of it. It was Daryl Borden at the Bombay Cafe.
Oh, that's an impressive first job.
So so I found out that I was going to be a dad, and it terrified me. And I'm like, I'm going to have to figure out like what it is I'm doing. I was very directionless at that point. I'd had leading up to that point, like high school and college age, my dad was a Navy pilot. I grew up, I was in junior ROTC in high school and Civil Air Patrol, and then I got an appointment to the Naval Academy. I took a ROTC scholarship. I wanted to be a Marine pilot, and I was been in uniforms all that time. And then my friends from high school and we decided to form a band and picked up instruments. And then I decided not to go the military route, and I started playing music in the 80s in Tuscaloosa back then.
Awesome.
I had a little band. Yeah. And so, then I was sort of drifting. So the opportunity to so then once finding out that I was going to be a dad and had to get serious and figure out what I was going to do, I'm like, well, if I'm going to and I enjoyed it, I felt like this may be it. I feel like I'm good at this. Maybe this would be the way to go. Well, I'm like, well, then you better find like the best person you can go and work for. And that was Frank Stitt, you know? And I think by then I was working at the Tutwiler Hotel, and they let me write the lunch menu. And in that time I was there, maybe a year and a half, there were at least like 6 chefs that came and went. Yeah. Many of them European chefs that I later thought maybe they traded on their accent and they couldn't have gotten a job in Europe, because they weren't really very good. Right. But, and anyway, so that was a high turnover rate for those guys. But I mean, they let me do the lunch there, and then I showed up at Highlands talked Frank into an interview and sat down with a 3-ring binder and showed him all this stuff, and that's kind of so cringe now to think about what that would have been like for him, to suffer me, which I could tell, Frank's interesting to talk to him. You can see it on his face that it's causing him pain.
Yeah.
Whatever you're talking about,
saying, it's not.
And so he's famous for doing an Irish exit in the middle of a conversation. Frankly, he really is. And so he somehow gave me a chance, and I got hired at Highlands, and despite some early fails, they didn't fire me, which I thought was remarkable. A couple of funny stories about that, but then, they were doing lunch at Highlands back then.
Yeah.
And Verba Ray was running the kitchen at lunch. Very matronly, lady, that Southern cook, and I'm trying to make cornbread, and she would call me out in front of the kitchen, and she's like, it'd be a cast iron skillet on top of the oven. Cornbread would come out of the oven, it was up on top, And she would walk over, and I would hear her yell my name out. Melville, is this your corn brick? Corn brick, I couldn't get cornbread down for a little while, and and then after she did that, I'm like, that's never happening again.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that.
That's the last straw. So you're gonna.
So I was motivated
cornbread.
by fear to never have that happen again, and so
no more super dense cornbread.
That's it. Yeah. So she had a little bit to do with that, Another little funny story, early story from Frank was the sous chef at the time, Michael Turner. He was like, I want you to take these green beans, and I want you to take them downstairs where the stove is, and there's a pot of boiling water down there, and I'd like you to blanch these green beans and then shock them in ice water. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I go down to do that. Frank walks into the kitchen, and he's like, did you salt this water? And I said, I can if you want me to. And he does, and then he just looks over. He doesn't make eye contact with me anymore, and he's like, Michael Turner, can you come here? We seem to be having a communication problem.
That's definitely not a question to ask.
So I learned that when Frank wants only one answer, yes or no.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that was the lesson.
Yeah.
But and then I was able to. Chris Hastings came back from California while I was there, and then we became like thick as thieves during that tenure. Frank had to kind of devote his attention to Bottega at that time, and left Chris as the executive chef of Highlands,
right?
The only one that's ever been named. And Chris had all these ideas coming fresh from California, and so one of the best parts of my early career was when I would show up to Highlands. He and I would sit on the back stoop with the menu from the night before and pencils, and we would write the menu, and I got to contribute. We would write the menu for that day, and we would pass ideas back and forth and brainstorm, and we developed this incredible relationship based on a creative interplay that was remarkable. And, it was stressing Frank out, because we were going off the reservation with some of this stuff.
I'm about to say.
And, that's Frank's baby, and understandably so. And so.
But it was, at the same time, it was, I guess, cool in a sense that he's allowing you guys to kind of.
It was very cool.
Because that's, like you said, if anybody knows Frank's dead, that's not,
it's not the way. Yeah. It's hard for him to do that.
Exactly. Really and hard. So to have faith in you guys to come up.
It meant everything.
Yeah.
It really did. And we pushed it. I mean, like we would. Frank would come by and taste my vinaigrette, and I'd have to defend it. I'd always have to defend it. It's like the ratio of oil to vinegar. I'm like, well, but Frank, it's a lower ratio of oil to vinegar, then you can dress the lettuces more lightly, and then they don't get weighed down. And so if you taste it with the lettuce, it's one thing, but if you just taste it by itself, it's another. You're not going to tell Frank did that.
No,
I'm not, and I didn't.
No.
but I always was called out and questioned. But what it meant was that you had to be prepared to defend all your actions, no matter what they were, and you had to be attuned to what you were doing, engaged in what you were doing, all in. There was no halfway, and it was always so. Yeah, that was good. It was good.
Good experiences.
And it was. I mean, if you ever came across, not tooting any horns here, but if you ever had the rabbit tamale at Hot and Hot, that was something I worked on.
Really? That's awesome. I gotta have that. I've seen
that for 20 years after I left.
I have seen it there, but never had it. But so what would you say one of your biggest takeaways working for someone like Frank Stitt? I mean we know he's legendary, not just in Alabama, but really across the country as being one of the greatest Southern cuisine chefs.
What Frank, the most generous thing out of that whole experience for me was because, and I didn't see this happen with many people, and certainly didn't happen a generation or two after I left, because he had 4 restaurants by then.
Right.
He was too busy.
Yep.
But not only was Frank in the kitchen a lot, including working a station when I started at times, he also had quite the culinary library, and he opened that to me. He trusted me, and so what he did for me was he pointed me in the direction of incredibly important food writers that got me really. So it was MFK Fisher and Elizabeth David and Richard Olney. Those became my North Stars too.
Right.
Reading about Bernard Loiseau and Burgundy Stars and his quest for his third, I became utterly smitten and in love with the whole trajectory of Michelin seeking. Michelin wasn't an option for us,
but being able to have that quality.
I wanted to go work for Joël Robuchon in France.
Oh, yeah.
And this was pre-EU, so they were, the French. You couldn't, if you were an American, you couldn't. If you weren't French, you couldn't.
Oh well.
You could do. The best thing you might be able to do is to be a stagiaire,
right?
Which would and in many cases to do that you actually have to pay. Not just not get paid.
Not just not get paid, but pay to actually
pay to be and just to peel potatoes for 8 hours or whatever it may
and
be.
hopefully you can pick up on something.
Maybe So, but that whole zeitgeist, if you will, of the Michelin system and this fanatical devotion, and so then along comes. And of course, Frank has a tie there directly. Was getting on my radar was Alice Waters, and I devoured her writing and her. And one of the things that was, she was ingredient driven, and I still am today.
Yeah.
And she was crediting farmers on her menu. She may have been the first to do that in this country, but it'd be like Chino Ranch carrots, or whatever it may be, or Ellerton Farms lamb, or on it goes. Well, those were also giving me names to remember too,
right.
But what it told me was that the most simple, common thing can be elevated if you care enough about it and you take it to the ultimate length. It's really, that could be like a Chino Ranch bell pepper.
Right.
It's like night and day, like life, change your life so much better than every other bell pepper that you had, which is fairly ordinary, but yet that's where, that's what I picked up on. One of the best meals I ever had when I got to go to Chez Panisse was something like, it was a canned white bean soup, but they were fresh cannellini beans, so they had like a creamy texture on the inside with a little bit of give on the outside because it wasn't a dried bean.
Right.
The soup was pureed, but had some whole beans in it, and you could tell. And it's the equivalent of a dry black-eyed pea to a fresh purple whole pea from the farmer's market. You cannot compare the two.
It is true. You can't.
So those were things that kind of opened my eyes to that and set me on a path, if you will. Frank being generous with the authors and with the writers and his stories, and I probably still need to sit down one day with him and just to thank him for that part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does. I mean, because that's a time when that kind of information you could only get through someone like a Frank Stitt, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have Food TV, you didn't have all this stuff that was out there.
There was Food Art magazine, which, if I'm not mistaken, was Bob Giuliani or whatever, the guy who had Spin magazine and Penthouse, I think.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, and then Art Culinaire was another, and it was sort of like a quarterly book that would come out. You know? And that's where I learned about Jean-Louis Paladin at the Watergate Hotel, and he was doing all this crazy stuff. And then finding out about Charlie Trotter and realizing this was a Michelin level chef who was not only American, he was Americana.
Right.
So I'm like, ding, bell goes off. Same thing with Alice Water. Well, it's great if you're living in Northern California and you're that close to the Central Valley and having that kind of growing season. But, I would see Frank and these people, farmers, would come in the back door with watercress or whatever it was, and just that whole ritual of how it was evaluated and received, and the interaction, and then having same thing with bringing in fish and dealing with people, and
I mean, searching out good quality ingredients is something. Again, going back to the time, I mean, that he had to seek out that stuff, because again,
he was a trailblazer.
Right.
There was nobody doing it.
No, there wasn't. You couldn't, like I said, you couldn't just get online and just order stuff, or pick up a phone. Well, you could pick up a phone, but it just wasn't as readily available. So, like I said, being a trailblazer to go out and search that speaks volumes to the fact that he passed it on to people like yourself who worked under him.
And not only that, because he's educated a lot of chefs in this town and all over the place, really, that have gone off. He had to educate the public, the dining public, and that's really what he did. You know. Now we know he didn't invent the crab cake, but in this town he did. In this town he did.
Definitely.
But, and I wouldn't take a single thing away from him or that.
Yeah.
But it became, and to this day, I stand like I'll die on the hill of being ingredient driven more than anything else. Yeah.
I love that. And I can tell. I mean, that was one of the things definitely when looking at the menu and tasting the food, that it definitely, I can taste the experience that you have. And I think I told, Matt that, after we dined there, that it was like, I can tell, the quality of ingredients speaks volumes from the quality of the food. And, they get it, because sometimes if people maybe aren't as crazy like that, like we are, some of that. But you go to some places and the food's good, but there is a level of separation, if you will, for someone who is ingredient driven.
I think I have a kind of cultish devotion to this stuff. That sometimes. Makes people's eyes glaze over if I try to talk about it too much, sometimes. And, and then there's always like the, everybody says, I don't know if everybody does, but, our secret ingredient is love. Well, I mean, it really is, you know.
Yeah.
Like
because you have a love and a passion for what you're doing. I mean,
well, here's the thing, too. We're in the hospitality business, but you have to come to a different place than looking at it as transactional.
Right. Yeah.
You have to, it has to be in your heart.
Yeah.
You have to have a generous heart. You can't have a miserly spirit. I mean, yes, you can, but that's sad, and that's what there's a lot of that out there, actually.
There is.
But, it's so one of the epiphanies that I had was, if we were going to practice hospitality, and we are buttholes to each other, and then we try to be nice, make nice to a guest, that's bullshit.
Yeah, you're right. It's not genuine.
It's not genuine.
No.
So the first thing we need to do is we need to start practicing hospitality with each other
Yes.
first.
Yes.
And then it never turns on or off. It's just always
It's natural.
on.
Yep.
It's the way we actually are,
Right.
you know. And I'm blessed at Dyron's to have a core group of guys that I've worked with for, I mean, I like pinch myself. Wait a minute, I've worked with these guys for 14 years.
That's wild.
Our median age is in the 40s for these guys.
That is incredible. I mean, that speaks volumes. It really does.
And especially for a mom and pop.
Right.
You know, to retain and to, but it also, by extension, that makes my job so much easier because, you know, anybody can make one really good plate of food.
Right.
But try to make 1,000 of them, or, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 14 years later, are you still...
That quality is still...
and are you putting everything in it every
Right.
time? And that's kind of weird. It's like, you got to give your best ever every single time, and that one time that you don't, or it's somebody who's been looking forward all week to come into your restaurant, and then they get a half-assed version
Right.
of it because you weren't dialed in.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, it feels sort of to me like, you know, we're always at the edge of everything going wrong, and catastrophe is just a second away, and it's just sort of a nail biter that you have to live like on that edge at all times, you know.
And at the end, it just all comes together.
It just does, and I just still don't know how it happens sometimes, to be honest with you. But you know, and you know, you probably saw the movie Like Water for Chocolate.
Yes.
You know.
Been a while ago, but yeah.
But you may remember where she's making a wedding cake and she drops a tear into the batter. And then everybody cries when they eat the cake, you know. There's a restaurateur author named Pino Luangio wrote a book called Tuscan in the Kitchen. And back in the 90s, he had, what was that place called? Remy was the restaurant, and then it was a couple of other places in New York. And then he had a restaurant in Tuscany called Il Vapori. But he wrote a book called Tuscan in the Kitchen, and it's crazy. Like his recipe starts. The first ingredient is onion, and the first instruction is hold the onion in your hand and consider the onion. We laughed about that in the kitchen, like the friends of mine that would read the book, you know. But there's, you know, consider the onion. Or if you're going to make risotto, you should not attempt risotto if you're in a bad mood. You know, it's like you should approach making risotto like a seduction.
Yeah.
You need to be patient. You need to take your time. You know, it requires attention. And, you know, all that matters.
It does.
We have to have the vibe right. So managing the vibe of the kitchen and the morale of the kitchen, that's really my number one job. Because if I get that right, if we get the rest right, then we've got the recipe for what we're trying to do.
It's like one of the first key ingredients.
We do staff meals. I've got a largely Hispanic crew, and the kind of food that we're doing, it's like there's not a Mexican restaurant in this country that does the food that we eat for ourselves. Right. You know, we use oxtails in our stock making. Well, when we make the stock, one of the cooks cleans all the oxtail meat. We roll it in corn tortillas. We fry it in beef tallow, and we make tacos dorado, which with shredded oxtail.
That sounds amazing.
I mean,
it's a lot better.
And it's a byproduct from what we're doing. So it's like,
but it's still a quality.
It's my favorite thing that we do along. You know,
quality staff dinner for Where sometimes a lot of staff dinners are just thrown together stuff just to feed them. But you're thinking a little more about that, which again that speaks to the volumes of what you're doing at Dyron's. And
the best compliment I ever got was from a guest saying that they're like, the air breathes differently in here. Because my predecessors tend to be of the old school berating and kind of yelling and conflict, and we've gone away from that, and so I feel like the servers, their countenance, they're more at peace. They're able to focus on the guest and do the jobs they need. And if a guest is, can I get asparagus instead of green beans, they can ask me, and I'm not going to scream at them.
Yeah.
And I know that's a lot hard. That does happen a lot more than you realize. It's like this antagonistic relationship,
right?
I never wanted. Frank was the one who broke down the wall between the front and the back of the house, for as far as I can tell, for me, in my experience.
Right.
And that was a lesson that I took from him too, to not do those things. But I feel like maybe we do go even further because, food is a love language for me.
Yeah.
And, so then we're loving each other through food. And also we tend to spend a lot more time at work than we do with our family and loved ones and everything. Right. So if we don't make it a pleasant place to be,
right,
then what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many people don't understand that.
No, they really don't.
At all.
It's more people need to take that, approach to it because, like you said, that to me, like I said a while ago, that's like, that is one of the first ingredients to what you guys do is, the quality of the staff's, mental health.
Yeah.
Best thing to say is, is if they're in good shape mentally and everything is, copacetic, then obviously they care more about what they're doing. And that can go from any industry. It doesn't matter if it's the hospitality industry or just whatever. It's like it starts at the top. And if everything is kind of, copacetic and fed down to everybody kind of gets together and will work together as a family and make some quality food, and quality times for the people. Because then again, that food is good, right? That comes out of there. The hospitality is good. And then the customer gets a fantastic experience.
Marco Pierre White, his couple sound like clips from different talks that he's given where he says a lot of chefs think and restaurateurs think that the most important thing in a restaurant is the food, but I take issue with that. He goes, first is the environment, because I don't care how good the food is, if you're not comfortable, you're not going to come back.
That's true.
And he goes, and then it's service, and then it's food,
right?
And they all are. I don't know that there's one more important than the other, but they're almost all equal. You can't take one out. You have to have.
No.
You have to have that. But and I'm not going to go too far into the recovery talk of things, but for as far as what I bring through that experience is, and this ties into creating a good environment, which is. Humility and a lack of ego, or a minimal.
Right.
You can't say lack. That's not really realistic. But it's hard sometimes to be on at all times and make sure that I've made gumbo now for God, I don't know how many batches that I've made, but I've got to be really into it every time.
Yeah.
And I am.
Yeah.
I really am. I don't know. Maybe I'm deranged. I don't know. But like the broth for the gumbo, it's a 3-day process. I don't know. Like I'll go to any length to get that kind of thing right. But the funny thing about it is I have to have somebody to do it for, because if you come to my house and watch what I do for myself, I'm trying to get better about that. But I only do this for other people.
Yeah,
I go to these lengths for others. It's kind of funny to think about that. For me, I want to path the least resistance, quickest possible.
You say it's funny, but to me, I look at that, people who are passionate about what they do, and especially chefs like yourself, that service aspect is what it is. So yes, I get that, because like you said, you would rather do more for them than yourself. And I don't see, as long as there's somewhat of a balance, I get it, because that's you putting your heart on the table or on a plate, if you will, and seeing,
Well, if I'm going to be, I don't. I don't ever want to be not doing this. So it's probably in my best interest to try to like stay somewhat healthy so that I can, you know. And I also don't have any other options, you know. Like we don't have
At this point in time.
Yeah, it's like it's also necessity, right?
Yes,
but
yeah,
I mean, for many of us in this climate that
Right.
the situation as it exists. So, but you know, maybe a different wrinkle on my outlook for all of this these days is I've made like a really conscious decision, along with ties into the humility thing too. And that is that I'm not as interested in being clever anymore. I'm not trying to create something out of thin air no one's ever seen before, or create some new style of food no one's ever seen before. I'm trying to execute at a high level. It's about technique,
Right.
and it's about the quality of the ingredients, of course, seasonality, of
Right.
course. But one of the biggest things is realizing just how many environmental toxins that are in our food supply,
Yes.
and caring about that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd say I'm 7 years into banning seed oils, long before it became trendy, and certainly before it ever got, unfortunately, politicized.
Right,
I'm not into that.
Yeah.
I'm just into what's healthy for people.
Right. Yep.
I don't care about the politics.
Yep.
So, you know, and looking for empirical evidence to support that, you know. So we now know atrazine and glyphosate pesticides. You know, you probably don't want to deal with that if you can help it. But I think it's inescapable in some ways because it's in the, you know, it's in, unfortunately. So it's about mitigating. You can't. So sourcing, you know, pasture-raised meats that are no antibiotics, no growth hormones, absolutely important.
Yep.
Eggs, farm eggs, you know, Frank McEwen from McEwen Grits. We're on that short list of folks that get a crack at some of his eggs, no pun intended. And it makes all the difference, you know. And then you find out, well, you know, these commodity eggs, each egg yolk is only the equivalent of a tablespoon of canola oil because of the corn diets that they're fed. That's linoleic acid, you know, and it makes its way. So it's, you know, not only what you eat, but it's what you ate.
Right. Yeah,
know?
that's a big part of it.
It's a big part of it. So that's in the back of our minds, you know, sourcing and trying to get better at it, because you can't strictly operate on only organic produce that comes from local growers, because our season isn't conducive to that, and so you have to branch out.
You have to, yeah.
But you can still, you know, and you may have to get. I mean, you've got to buy Worcestershire sauce, or you've got to buy yellow
Certain
onions,
things,
or just
yeah.
staple things, you know. And certainly, if you're spending, you know, I mean, you know, there are use cases for things where it makes sense, but you know, like having a source for cultured butter from grass-fed milk that's, you know, by a woman that studied in Normandy, and they have 12 cows. It's called Animal Farm. It's a little dairy in Vermont. Well, it's $1,000 a gallon for that stuff, or $50 a pound. So you can't just, it's hard to do. The economic, even, and look, we're in Crestline, so we have.
Right.
We do have some advantages demographically, but yet I had to kind of think about this ethically. I'm like, well, is this an elitist thing to be like getting these really great ingredients that cost obviously more?
Right.
And then I thought about it like this. This is a health issue in a sense. You know, I'm really a healthcare worker if I do my job the way I would like to be able to do it. And so ultimately, you either pay the farmer or you pay the pharmacy.
I mean, that's...
So you pony up a little extra for a grass-fed steak.
Right. Which I'd much rather do that.
But you're getting a longer health span.
Yeah.
So it's actually an investment in your health.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it, because I've never thought about that.
Because those prescription drugs and those doctor's appointments and those protocols, they add up, and they're expensive too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And I've got a grandson, and I want to be able to throw a ball with him or run him around, and I want other people to be able to do that.
Right.
You know? So that's in the background.
That's a great way to look at it, for sure.
Do, you know?
Yeah.
It's a... It's trying to find a way to be of maximum use to my fellows.
Yes.
As they say. And so, and this is a part of that too, because if I can move the needle towards caring about cleaner food and try to advocate for that and get on a soapbox periodically and talk about it, well, then maybe I'm reaching more people than I can that can just come through the doorway in our restaurant.
Right. Yeah,
There's an educational aspect to it too.
Yeah.
Beyond self-promotion.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. So let's talk about Dyron's and get into it. I mean, you've been there, did you say 14 years now?
I've left and come back a few times. I'm maybe 2 or 3 years now at the helm.
Okay.
One of the things I did in my recovery journeys, I took a hiatus from running kitchens and went back to being an Indian and focused on my health and things like that. And then I kind of reached a point of where I felt like I was ready to take on more again, and that ended up leading to doing that, taking that role, and I've embraced it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
It's back in the saddle for me, but this time doing it differently. This time.
Different
It's
approach.
not the Chris Melville show.
Right.
I've got a bunch of people who are making their livelihoods and their careers are tied to this, and it takes a huge team effort to get it done.
Right.
So all of my praise is for my team. It's not me.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Dyron's Lowcountry.
Yeah.
It's what's the origin story, I guess you will, just in a nutshell. I know Dyron is the owner.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the restaurant itself.
Okay. Well, Dyron and Sonia, when I met them, it was a couple years into them running. I think they took it in 2007 is when they opened.
Okay.
I had been a partner in Malby's restaurant at the very end, and there was a restaurant in between called Table that lasted maybe about a year, and then so I didn't, Dyron came along. I didn't have an overlap with him then, but the thing that impressed me right off the bat was that he and his wife Sonia went to culinary school in order to open a restaurant.
Really?
Not to be chefs.
Yeah.
But they went to the culinary, and they both graduated through that program. And that was kind of a cool commitment.
Yeah. You don't see that often.
No.
Or probably ever.
No. And then, both of them really, but Sonia also in particular, just the best people that I've ever... The best owners that I've ever worked
we had a chance to meet
best,
Sonia when we were there.
She's unbelievable.
Yeah, she's super nice.
She's real, though.
Yes.
She's an embodiment of hospitality, and she's, legitimately cares about other people and is warm, and she's real, and that probably has a lot to do. Those two have everything to do with why I get to work with guys who've been there 16 years.
Yeah.
Because... So I'm grateful for them, and I guess, so I think, I don't want to go into Dyron's story. I know that food for him, I think his dad owned a Dairy Queen in Coleman.
Okay.
And told him never get into the restaurant business. So that's what he did.
So that's what he did. Yep. The standard father-son moment.
And, right.
Don't do what I do, but they do it anyways.
And so Dyron's Lowcountry, I think, but now I think he feels like just Dyron's is good enough. Yeah. And he's kind of said, hey, Chris, if you ever felt like doing a pasta dish or you ever want to go, and I'm like, okay, and I look at it like we're a neighborhood restaurant first. Right. So we can do different things. Yeah.
But even in a sense, I mean, it's cool that, like you said, you may not be leaning into the Lowcountry as much. Yeah. But for someone who we've been to Charleston, we've had opportunities to eat, that Lowcountry cuisine. It's really cool to be able to go to a spot because there's not many people that specialize in, or I mean, say specialize, even offer a whole lot of Lowcountry other than like a shrimp and grits. I mean, that's kind of a Lowcountry thing.
Well,
or gumbo, which is
we're
Louisiana and Lowcountry, but
Carolina gold rice.
Yes,
I mean, I can promise you that.
And that's a key. That is a big time key.
It is. A lot of people say they are and they don't.
Right.
But we are.
Yeah. And I can tell you the difference.
We source our flour. I mean, something as ubiquitous as wheat flour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the number one vector for pesticide spraying because they spray glyphosate on wheat as a desiccant, to prevent mold and spoilage and such. And unfortunately, then that's right before we get to eat it. So, tracking down flour that you can find out whether glyphosate or what's the other one that they tend to enrich? Not niacin, but well, anyway, it's a quest, to source this stuff because people, we're in an era where people just talk about their gluten sensitivity or gluten allergies, and it's not that we had an epidemic of Crohn's disease, obviously, but yet these same people I know, they go to like Italy and they eat pastries and pasta and they don't have that effect.
Any problem, right?
So, so that's kind of inspires us to cut all that stuff out, get rid of those, foods that cause oxidative stress, and infringe on metabolic functionings. So secretly I'm learning all of this stuff so that I can, and I don't preach it. I just do it. I just do it and let
the action speak for itself. So
it informs what we do to such a degree. I do macaroni and cheese at the restaurant. It's 3 types of cheeses in a bechamel, Tillamook, white and sharp and medium cheddar and Reggiano Parmesan. But the pasta is lumace pasta from Italy, so there's no enrichment or glyphosate or anything. So, yeah, it's something as basic as mac and cheese that we put on our fried chicken. But, it's the details.
Yes.
It's frying in beef tallow.
Yeah.
It makes everything better.
Yeah, it does. I mean, not only is it healthier, but like you said, it tastes better.
It's healthier. It's legitimately healthier. Yeah. Do the research. Yeah. It's actually, they lied about a lot of this stuff to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way they do it. It's. Yeah.
Or they were wrong.
We can't.
Let's just say they're wrong. I don't want to get into the conspiratorial stuff.
I'm with you on a lot of that. It's business.
They're not looking out for our interests. Let's just say. I mean, and I'm trying. I really am. I mean, that's all we're trying to do.
Yeah. No, I mean, you do your part, and that's that you can't change the world, but you can control.
Yeah, that's
what
all
you're
we
doing.
can do. And I can sleep at night, honestly. I mean, listen, and I tend to look at, and I have to couch that a little bit with myself, but part of my job is to try to see problems in their infancy before they get out of hand and put out fires. Yeah. So, that old adage of when you got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. Yeah. Well, sometimes you get into that mindset of looking for trouble and problems all the time, and then you start to only see problems. Yeah. Yeah. And that can be unhealthy too.
It can be. Yeah.
So it's a balance.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm figuring it out as I go, I guess.
So let's talk about some of the dishes that you guys do offer, because I think, again, like I said a while ago, it's unique in that we don't see a lot of that in Birmingham. But talk about some of the unique and maybe more popular dishes for sure.
We were talking about Lowcountry. Well, it's interesting to look at some of the traditions and tease out little things. Like, for instance, there's a not well known but very traditional dish called Country Captain in the Carolinas, and the premise behind that is, well, first of all, it's essentially a prototype of curry. When you think about the sea captains of that time, they were trading in port cities global trading, early trading going on, a lot of stuff going back and forth. So I'm assuming that's how these spices came into play, and they already had rice going on, and it's so it's a so we kind of took that and said, well, let's elevate that, and we'll do it with quail, and but we call it our country captain, and it's a quail dish that we're serving as an appetizer. That might be an example, and so it's fun to kind of look backwards and find these. Of course, in the summer, we take advantage of all the shelled peas and do Hoppin' John as a set for our grilled fish. And we'll
definitely
the gumbo, that we're making. Everybody gets like 9/10 of it right, but what separates that 1/10? Well, to me, the biggest thing you got to get right is the broth.
Yes.
And doing it all from scratch. So we do an overnight chicken stock, brown chicken stock, and then we repeat that whole process for a second overnight at a double strength. And then on the third day, we infuse it with shrimp shells or, snapper frames from our Gulf Red snapper or flounder. And so that's the third day. So that's a 3-day process to do it. It takes about 4 hours for us to make our dark roux, which I do half with butter, with half butter and half duck fat, because we can. And it's great. And then of course sourcing really good andouille. We had narrowed it down to 2 different kinds that we really liked, and we couldn't pick which one we liked better, so we used 2 kinds. Andouille.
Nothing wrong with that.
Everybody does the Cajun trinity of celery, onion, and peppers. So, and then we do filet, of course.
Right.
And then there's always sort of like, we're on the traditional side where we don't put anything tomato related anywhere near it. Some people do. That's the style, and that's fine. But we don't.
Yeah.
And that roux is chocolate roux too. It's right on the edge of. It's tricky to get it to that without burning it.
Yeah. Well, I love gumbo, and it's some of the best gumbo I've ever had. It's fantastic.
That means
it's really rich. You can tell. Again, that goes back to just somebody like myself. Maybe not everybody can tell, but I can tell when something, like you said, 3-day process. I can tell there's something that goes into it more than just a standard gumbo that some people kind of throw together. You can taste it. And I've said this before on dishes, on like videos that we've done. If you've never known XYZ, go try this place and you'll know what I'm talking about. Yep. And that's, if you don't know what a rich gumbo is or, a proper gumbo, try yours, because it's definitely, you can tell.
One of the things
a long process.
Well, thank you. It is. And, for somebody who, wasn't exposed to a lot of this stuff growing up, but then embraced it, and then to hear things like having a 90-year-old say these collard greens taste like the collards that my grandfather made.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, that's got to be 150 years ago now. That's wild to me, but it means everything to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, it really, really does, and we're just, it's having people that I work around that are also equally fanatical about being consistent, because, I remember interviewing with this guy years ago as general manager, and we were sitting talking, and he was like, he was trying to make a case for it's better to be consistent. Better to be mediocre and consistent than to be hit or miss. And this was at the club to let you, on the backstory. So, and I kind of felt like it's better to be excellent and consistent, but a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
You can never be perfect, but well, he of course shared me with the story about Ray Kroc. He's like, Ray Kroc didn't set out to make the best hamburger. He set out to make the same hamburger.
Right.
And there's a certain genius in that. Well, so here we are in the gumbo. I've got to make that. If it was good one time, it's got to be good every time now.
Right.
And so that's what haunts me. That's what makes me kind of like wake up in the middle of the night. Is just the internal pressure to perform at that level,
making that quality day after day.
You set a standard, you set a bar, and then you got to stick to it. So that probably is like the. It's not sexy.
Right.
It's not going to show up on an Instagram post. But it involves the technique and the ingredients behind it and all of the effort that doesn't really show up in a picture, doesn't show up on a piece of paper when you see a printed menu.
Right.
It's the execution part of it. And that probably is the thing that takes most of my focus more than anything. You know, honestly. The seasons kind of do things for you, you know. I don't like kind of conjure up an idea in my head and go try to find all the things to get it to make it happen.
Right.
I tend to like see the things and then conjure up with the things.
Yeah.
Go to the farmer's market,
See what's available.
and then once you do it for long enough, you kind of get into a rhythm with the seasons, and it becomes kind of a intuitive thing, which is fun.
Right.
But it's always good. The best part of it too is when you can find ways to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And do new things. So, you know, we're always trying to do that too. So,
do you have a favorite season as far as when it comes to cooking, or like certain ingredients that?
No, I like to bastardize a quote from Duke Ellington where he said, you know, somebody asked him what his favorite music was, and he said, "There's only two kinds of music, good and bad." And I guess
true.
I look at that way about food.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a snob.
Right.
I mean, I'm a reformed perfectionist, but I'm not a snob. But so I don't, you know, people say, "Oh, I could never cook for you." You know, you're a chef. I'm like, no, you don't understand. If somebody hands me a grilled cheese sandwich that they made, it feels like a warm hug, and it feels like love to me because they put effort.
They put effort into it. Yeah.
I am not going to criticize it. That's not how I am.
I love that.
So, you know, maybe to kind of put to answer your question a little more would be to say wintertime, which we're in.
Right.
Tends to be kind of a doldrum because it's so gray and bleak typically, and there's not as many things, you know, you have to look for what those things are. Well, it occurred to me last year, I'm like, you know, in the same time of year, you know, we all have heirloom tomato salads in the summer.
Yep.
And we have this supplier that's bringing us, like, over a couple months period right now, 16 varieties of citrus, organic citrus.
Wow.
Things I'd never heard of before. Mandarin quats, tangelos, varieties of tangerines and mandarins, and that I'd not heard of before. Varieties of blood oranges I didn't know about. Sanguinello, Moro, Caracara oranges. I could go on and on, but the point is, a light went off in my head, and I'm like, let's do an heirloom citrus salad in the middle of winter, because there's all these riot of colors, yellow, orange, bright red, you know, and it's like a ray of sunshine
in the winter,
in the middle of this cold, bleak, dreary, gray, monochrome, depressing, seasonal affective disorder time, and you can get excited about it.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's so
like
now
that.
we've got the citrus right now. We're doing different things with it.
Yeah.
And we're about to launch our borrowing from Italy, you know, shaved fennel, red onion, arugula, and all kinds of citrus.
Yeah.
Why not?
Right.
You know. So it's maybe more of a challenge to find, like, to tease out those cool things that are in what you would think be an off season,
right?
Not as much to do. You know, there's every season has its cool stuff,
right? Yeah, it does. It really does.
And it's just being dialed into it.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's fun because that kind of thing is, like you said, that taps into your creativeness, because if you get all these different, you know, citrus. I mean, that now that gets your creative, blood flowing and come up with something that's unique and different.
When it comes to the creative process, I will tell you this, that the most intimidating thing to do for me is to give me a blank piece of paper. I have to have something to work against. A counterpoint. Yeah. You say to me, I'm a vegan and I'm a this and I'm a this and I can't have that, I can't have that. And you give all these restrictions and then I'll figure out a way.
Right.
And so, so I need
so it's a challenge.
Give me a framework and then I'll riff on that or I'll work with that. If you just say sky's the limit and put me in a blank space, it's gonna be more challenging for me. I needed to see like the list of all these citrus that he was showing and offering, and started thinking about it and trying to I had to see all that to come up with the idea.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have just come up with the idea on my own volition. Yeah. So it's getting the inspiration out of the ingredients, really.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Well, we're coming up about an hour, so I think we'll wrap it up here. Before we do, this is kind of my final 4 questions.
Okay.
What I call the final 4.
Sure.
And I'll go ahead and preface this. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and so people who are watching or listening, may say I stole this from another podcast, because I did.
Okay. Fair.
It's a podcast and he typically uses the same question. So the first, it's 2 questions. The first one would be, and this is in context of not necessarily what you enjoy or don't enjoy, but more of what you enjoy, maybe cooking with, or creating with. Yeah. So the first one would be the best vegetable.
Yeah, I mean, that's so subjective. Best. I mean, in order to define what would be considered best, I guess, one thing would be maybe versatility, how many different things you can do with it. And it would be kind of boring to say, I suppose, but best ingredient. I mean, if I was being a gun to my head and I had to pick something, I might say potato.
Okay. Yeah.
There's more things you can do with a potato than probably any other thing that I can think of, and it's good for you.
Right.
Yeah. The Irish were kept alive by potatoes for years.
That's definitely
until they weren't.
Okay, and now would be the worst fruit.
It'd probably be a tie between a red delicious apple and a kiwi for me. I would have to agree on the kiwi. Yeah. I'm not a big kiwi person, but yeah, that's definitely 2. Okay, third question. Like I said, this is number 4. Number 2, 3. I'm glad to hear music, because we talked about that earlier. Because I'm a big music person, and I always include a music question in my final 4. I've only had one guest that doesn't like music. Okay. So it kind of fell flat, but you're a music person, so give me a type of music or bands that are, musician that you would listen to after having a long day or just stressful day, just something that's calming or into your aspect. I mean, I like heavy music. Sometimes I have stressful days and I'll listen to heavy music. Yeah. So really just anything that just kind of helps you escape what you had going on that day. If it were a genre, I would probably say it tends to be that kind of ethereal, kind of ambient, like dream pop, maybe. Most recently, I've gotten into Eric Satie, who's a French composer from the 1860s, 1880s, and the reason that you've heard the melodies in his music, but he, along with Debussy, he was the first to kind of create kind of mood music, not music that requires active listening, but you can actually have in the background. So, that's what I've been kind of getting into more lately. But that's exactly what I do. You know, I have a vintage stereo system.
Yeah.
I've got Magnapan speakers, tube amps, and I get home, and that's what I do. I will put on music, and I listen to all genres. So, but my heavier, more pounding phase is diminished. It's not gone, but it's not
right. Yeah.
Maybe once. I'm not raging
You
against the machine
listen,
like I was.
Definitely understand that. Okay, so final question we got is, let's say you're going to do a simple dinner for, a group of friends. What's that dinner table going to look like?
Like, what are we eating? What are we having?
What's the menu going to look like? I mean, it's just again, just simple.
Yeah. Well, one dish that's a fallback to me is it's known in this town as the Capellini Bottega. But angel hair pasta, San Marzano tomatoes, garlic, chili, basil, sea salt, olive oil. I could eat that, probably until I die.
Yeah.
Like I could,
That sounds amazing.
when I was at Highlands Monday nights, we were closed, so in order to get some more experience in more stations when I was younger, growing up, I started working Monday nights at Bottega. So I got a chance to work the pasta station and the grill station and the saute station, and we were doing Italian food. And that Capellini Bottega, not only did I prepare it all the time, but when I would show up on Mondays, the first thing I did was make one for myself. And it's just something I can do without really having to think about it. I can do it reflexively, and it's I like food that is soul satisfying, that has a craveability. It's comforting.
Yeah.
It has to be more than just intellectual food. Does not do it for me.
Right.
The foam, the spherification, the sous videing, and all of that stuff. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
But it doesn't speak to you. Yeah. I totally understand that.
That's just gimmickry and novelty.
Yeah.
And maybe there's certainly a place for that.
Right.
There is.
Right. And again, it's all about what speaks to you and speak. I mean, I agree. I enjoy those going to restaurants and some of that. But again, if I'm approached with the same question I just asked you, that's not going to be on the menu. It's going to be more, like you said, more homey and yeah.
Marco Pierre White's advice was, as a chef, he goes, you don't want to cook for these Michelin inspectors. You don't want to cook for anybody else. He goes, you need to cook the food that you like to eat, number one. And number two, he goes, you need to look at your role as a chef as you're grabbing someone by the hand and saying, come with me, and you're taking them on a journey that is a part of your personal story through the food that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing, because you're putting yourself into it like that.
I love that. That's perfect. That's
you're taking their hand and taking them on a path they've never been down before.
Yeah.
If you get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, and that's perfect. Good way to end it. I mean, I've always wanted. Speaks to me when I can have a chef's dinner that speaks to his journey.
Yeah.
And so, great. Well, Chris, I appreciate you being a guest on the show.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. Everybody check out Dyron's.
I'll, Matt had mentioned that I should, and I'll do this if you want to, I didn't do it yet, but I will. He had kind things to say about the lamb shank, and would I be willing to jot any of that down? And of course I would. I had another friend of mine said, that's braising. That's really a technique more than a recipe. And, there's a few things like, what do you do? Well, we marinated in red wine for a couple days before we braise it. That might be all you needed to know. Like, okay, that's it. Or, make sure you have a really good homemade stock to braise into. You use to braise with, instead of water or some canned stuff, or okay, then that's how you can elevate it, because most people can get the fundamentals. It's like little tricks.
Right.
Everything's about
Changing it
just
up.
little wrinkles, little tips and pointers.
Yeah, braising is one of the first, I guess, techniques that I kind of learned as a home chef.
Yeah.
And, like you said, I mean, just changing up the liquid is just, it doesn't always have to be a wine. I mean, it can be, I've done a sweet tea brine.
Yeah.
I mean, a braise. Root beer braise. I mean, it's like the liquid can be whatever, and it's going to give you, different flavors.
It's trial and error. In some ways, it's the scientific method, right?
Yes.
Where you control for variables,
Yep.
and then just make one little change and see what that did to the outcome. And if you do that over enough time, you begin to get like a fundamental understanding of the mechanics of what's happening in the food and what's going on. And then when you get that, it completely frees you from being bound to a recipe or anything else.
Right.
Because you've got this conceptual idea of the process down.
Now you can play with it.
Now you can play with it.
Yeah, I love that.
It was said, back to another jazz reference, but may have been Miles Davis or something, but basically, in order to break the rules, you've got to learn the rules first.
That's
break
awesome.
the rules, but you got to know what rules you're breaking
Definitely
and what
break
they're
them,
about.
No.
First, though, a lot of people want to start off by breaking rules.
No.
But, honestly...
you got to learn it first and understand it.
To
learn how to break it.
2 cooks, 1 recipe, 2 dishes anyway.
Right.
My challenge is to get different people to keep putting out the same food that the people came in. They go, I had that pork chop, and they tell their friend about it. They come there for it, and it shouldn't matter who showed up that day at work. It should be the same one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And that lamb shake, it's fantastic. It was good. It was fantastic. I love it.
Well, thanks again for this opportunity.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a great conversation.
I like talking, and sometimes that's my undoing. But this may have been an okay time to let it out.
It's perfect. It's perfect time.
All right. Awesome. All right. Thank you.